Hello everyone, welcome to PC Divine World. Today I am going to rank the albums of Blue Oyster Cult. I haven't seen too many people rank their albums on here because they obviously have a lot and it doesn't seem like they're that popular of a band anymore. They should be considered one of the great hard rock bands of all time, but they sort of got forgotten about. In terms of US hard rock bands from the 70s, really there was 5 major ones if you think about it: Alice Cooper, Kiss, Aerosmith, Blue Oyster Cult, and Ted Nugent. Other than that, the big hard rock bands were mostly from the UK until the 80s. So, Blue Oyster Cult for some reason has gotten forgotten about their influence. They were really one of the first bands, originally called sort of like the American Black Sabbath. They weren't as heavy as them, but they were dark in other ways. Their lyrics and imagery. What made them even a little bit more frightening was they kind of just looked like regular guys, almost like maybe these guys really were in a cult. Kind of have like a biker vibe to them rather than Black Sabbath, who would come out in all black and sort of played up that imagery a little bit. But they had big influence on a lot of bands. They were like one of the first bands to use lasers in concert. Ironically enough, they've only had a handful of songs remain on radio: Godzilla, Don't Fear the Reaper, and Burning for You, which is sort of a comeback for them. But let's rank their albums now. Again, these are my preferences based on a number of things, just like how good the songs are. And what comes into a lot too when I rank these are which album am I most likely going to grab. Even though an album might be considered a classic, if for whatever reason I've heard it a million times or I like to hear something different, I might rank that one a little bit lower or higher based on that as well. So it never made a really bad album. It's one of those few bands. Every one of their albums has probably at least a couple of classics, except maybe their lowest ranked ones. So let's get into that right now. So first, the lowest ranked album is Imaginos. Came out, I believe, in 1988. This was sort of a project from Albert Bouchard, who was the band's original drummer. And the record company, I guess, urged them to make it into a Blue Oyster Cult album. So I guess Eric Bloom and Buck Dharma came in and wrote some songs and put down some tracks. But it doesn't really sound like a cohesive band unit. As far as the songs, they're all pretty good. Nothing that memorable. They do a new version of Astronomy, which is not that great either. They actually have a song called Blue Oyster Cult on here as well. Again, it's not a bad album. It's supposed to be a concept album. I don't know what the story is. It's in the booklet. It has a big, long story. It doesn't really, it's kind of like more of a concept album rather than a rock opera. There's a bunch of guests on here as well, including Robbie Krieger from The Doors, Joe Satriani. Let's see. A bunch of guys who did a lot of the drum and bass work on it. So, like I said, it's not really a cohesive album, but it's still decent enough, I would say. Coming in next, and I would say all of the albums from now on are all very good or better. And this was, like I said, a difficult task ranking these because they all have some great songs and you don't want to put one in front of another just because of a couple songs. But this one I'm ranking next, Curse of the Hidden Mirror. They came out with 2 albums fairly quickly in, 1999 and 2000, I believe. So this was the second one. First song, Dance on Stilts, was somewhat of a radio hit. But the rest of the album is fairly good, but nothing really great. Stone of Love is pretty good. Eye of the Hurricane. Let's see. I mean, all the songs are pretty good. It's just nothing that grabs you where it's like, oh, this is a classic. The other one they released first, Heaven Forbid, in 1999. We'll talk about that a little later, but that one's much better. Maybe CMC just needed them to release an album, but again, pretty good. Next up is their 1986 album, Club Ninja. For years, people said, this without a doubt is their worst album, but I don't think it's really that bad. It's got one of my favorite songs on here, Dancing in the Ruins, which pains me to rank this so low. It has a lot of 80s keyboard and arena rock feel to a lot of the songs. White Flags, Perfect Water's a really good song that's been brought back in concert. Madness to the Method's pretty good. But this was their last album they made, and I think 13 years until they made Heaven Forbid. Howard Stern even does like a guest appearance here. He does an intro to a song. I believe he used to have Eric Bloom and Buck Dharma on the radio all the time because I believe Eric Bloom was married to one of Howard Stern's cousins. So Eric Bloom used to always go around and say he was Howard Stern's cousin. So it's funny too because when he had him on, they started talking about their hits and stuff like that. And he's like, Eric, do you actually sing any of the hits? Because Buck Dharma sings Don't Fear the Reaper and Burning for You. So it's pretty funny that when you think about it, Eric Bloom is the lead singer, but really doesn't sing a lot of their hits. Well-known songs, yeah, but their actual hits, no. But again, decent album. Next up, probably going to be surprised I'm ranking this so low. That's Agents of Fortune. I believe this is their best-selling studio album because of Don't Fear the Reaper. But besides the three really well-known songs on here, This Ain't the Summer of Love, Don't Fear the Reaper, and E.T.I., which is a great song, the rest of the album is just not that great. In fact, it seems like Eric Bloom and Buck Dharma don't even sing a lot of the other songs on here. Almost sounds like some of the lesser tracks on their first album, sort of like that San Francisco sound. They actually did a live album of this whole album to commemorate it a few years ago, and I don't know why. I guess because Don't Fear the Reaper was their biggest song, so this ended up being their biggest studio album, I guess. But really, it's not that great. Yeah. So, next up, Revolution by Night. I think this came out in 83. Another great opening track, Take Me Away. But this one actually has some other really killer songs on. Eyes of Fire. Shooting Shark was a hit, but I think that's kind of boring. More like synth pop almost. Slow synth pop. Second side is pretty heavy as well. Dragon Lady, Light Years of Love. It's produced by Bruce Fairbairn, however you spell his name. One of their better sounding albums. If you know their catalog, they don't really have great production until maybe Coltosaurus Erectus in '79. So their first, 5 or 6 albums don't really sound that great. But this one actually sounds pretty good. This is the first one without Albert Bouchard. It's Rick Downey on drums. Other than that, it's kind of got that, just like Club Ninja, that arena rock, keyboardy feel to it. But this one's much better. Next up is their second album, Tyranny Mutation. Might be surprised that I'm ranking it this low. The first side, the black side, Red in the Black, OD'd on Life Itself, Hot Rails to Hell, 7 Screaming Disbusters is a great side. But then the other side, Baby Ice Dog, Wings Wetted Down, Teen Archer, Mistress of the Salmon Salt, that's okay. That's why I'm kind of ranking it low, how the second side or the red side of the album is not as good. If you got these reissues, they have a bunch of bonus tracks on here as well. But I think the first three albums also suffer from lack of production. That's kind of another reason I don't listen to those as well, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. Next up, their latest album. What's this called? I forgot. The Symbol Remains. When this came out, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. It came out in 2020. It's a double album, but I don't believe it's 45 RPM. It's actually a true double album because I believe it's over 60 minutes. Actually, a little bit longer than most double studio albums were in the 70s. The first side A, is really good. That Was Me, Box in My Head, Tainted Blood, Nightmare Epiphany. There's a couple songs they could have cut from this and maybe squeezed it onto one album to make it like a 45-minute album. The Alchemist is really good. Secret Road is really good. Eric Bloom is up there. He was probably 74 or so when they recorded this. They have another guy, Richie Castellano, who's been in the band about 20 years. He produced it and actually sung some vocals on here. But it's really more of a Buck Dharma album, which is not a bad thing. Sounds really good. So this is, out of all the classic legacy bands, this is probably one of the best albums from any of them in the last 20 years or so. Next up is the album I was talking about earlier, Heaven Forbid, from 1999. Really heavy, actually. See You in Black. Harvest Moon was somewhat of a radio hit. X-Ray Eyes, Hammer Back, Still Burning, and they do another version of In Thee from Mirrors. But overall, this is a really solid, good album. One of the best hard rock albums of the 90s if you're going for straight ahead hard rock. A lot of people complain about the cover, that it looks really low budget, whatever, but I think it's pretty good. Speaking of Mirrors, that's up next. This is 1979. So by then, this is produced by Tom Werman, which is, this album does actually sound pretty good. Well-known songs on here are Doctor Music, The Great Sun Jester, In Thee, The Vigil. So this is actually a really solid album, sort of forgotten about. Now people talk about it more. I think Martin Popoff rated it his favorite Oyster Cult album, and I could see that. It is pretty good. By then, even when their albums stopped selling, they were still an arena band. So, believe it or not, if you look at their catalog, there's only a few of their albums that were like even certified gold. I think Fire of Unknown Origin, Some Enchanted Evening, Agents of Fortune, maybe Spectres, and that's it. I think this one was the first one to sort of not certify again, but it's definitely worth picking up. Up next, their debut, Blue Oyster Cult. A lot of classics on here. Transmaniacom, NC. Then came The Last Days of May, Stairway to the Stars, Before a Kiss, A Red Cap, Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll, and Workshop of the Telescopes. They do have some demos of here from their earlier band, Soft White Underbelly, I believe they were called. But it's from 1972, and it sounds like it was produced probably in 1968. So their first three albums, even though they're from the early 70s, they sound like they were recorded probably 5 years earlier, because there's just, the quality is just not that great. And I'll talk about that again when I talk about another album where they redid some of their classics. But again, solid album, but not one I pick up too often, because I'd rather listen to the live versions or maybe another version as well. So the last four are definitely my favorites here. Coming in at number 4 is Coltosaurus Erectus. Sort of an underrated album, but again, another one now that people are talking about. The first of two that was produced by Martin Birch, better known as the producer of Deep Purple, Iron Maiden, a lot of classic British bands. And this one does sound, this is, along with Agents of Fortune, probably their best produced albums, even though this one doesn't sound like Agents of Fortunes. Black Blade, Divine Wind, Marshall Plan, Lips in the Hills, Unknown Tongue. The only thing I can complain about this album is sort of the running order. You would have thought, listening to this, that Lips in the Hills and Unknown Tongue would have started the album. I think it would have made a better running order, but this is 1980. Cool cover, too. Coming in at number 3, Spectres. One of their better selling albums. A lot of well-known songs on here. Godzilla, Golden Age of Leather, Death Valley Nights, Are You Ready to Rock, Going Through the Motions, I Love the Night, Nosferatu. Sort of portraying these guys. What I mentioned earlier about them almost being scarier than Black Sabbath is they sort of just look like regular guys who are just like sort of into the occult and like actually really into it. Yeah, this one's pretty good as well. Sort of an underrated album. No one really talks about this too much, but coming in at number 2, I almost ranked this as number 1. It might be my favorite album, but I had to put it as number 2 because of another one, and that's Fire of Unknown Origin. Burn a Few was probably the first song I heard from them. I remember that when that song came out, it was all over the radio. But the whole album is really good, really heavy. Fire of Unknown Origin, Burning for You, Veteran of the Psychic Wars, Heavy Metal, The Black and Silver, Joan Crawford, Don't Turn Your Back. And the song Veteran of the Psychic Wars was also featured in the Heavy Metal animated movie. So if you've seen that, again, it's produced by Martin Birch. This was their last sort of big album. I believe it went platinum. And definitely an underrated album. They're not known as they're known obviously as a 70s band, but this one definitely the best of the 80s for them, and one of the best hard rock albums of the 80s, I think. And finally, number 1, Secret Treaties. This one is a classic pretty much from start to finish. Career of Evil, Subhuman, Dominance and Submission, ME 262. KG Cretans is the only, probably out of the 8 songs, it's probably the only one that's not sort of well known. Harvester of Eyes, Inflaming Telepaths, and Astronomy. This one also has a bunch of B-sides, including a version of Born to Be Wild. So the first 3 albums are sort of known as the black and white albums because of the covers are all black and white. So there you have it. There's my ranking of their albums. I'm going to mention some other stuff now. So they have 3 sort of well-known live albums. First one was On Your Feet or On Your Knees. Kind of a creepy cover there. It sort of looks like a secret society limo or something like that. Next up is Some Enchanted Evening. I think this came out in 78. Yeah. And from what I've read, this is actually their best-selling album of all time. So it's a single live album. It's only got 7 songs on it, but it's got a version of Kick Out the Jams from the MC5 and We Gotta Get Out of This Place as well. So. And actually, my favorite live album from them is the one they did in '82 on the Fire of Unknown Origin tour. It's called Extraterrestrial Live. It sort of sums up a good summary of their whole career. Yeah, it's got songs from all of their albums, and it's actually Robbie Krieger plays on a version of Roadhouse Blues as well. So, and also this live album, it's their. I believe came out in 2000, so what is that? The 30th anniversary. What is it? A Long Day's Night. This is actually a DVD and a CD, but it's got all classics and songs from Heaven Forbid as well. And yeah, probably one. It's got Lips on the Hills too, which is they don't play too often, and Perfect Water. So I would definitely look for that as well. That's really good. What I was mentioning earlier about versions of songs from their early albums, in the 90s, 1994. They put this out called Cult Classic, where they re-recorded all of their hits and some album tracks. And this was a trend back in the 90s to bands to do this, I think, because they can now have ownership of the songs. And if people want to use them in movies or commercials, they can use the versions that they own the publishing to. And this was done for the movie It, the television movie. They used the Don't Fear the Reaper version from this, so they went ahead and recorded a bunch of others too. And I think the versions on here are way better and sound better than the original 3 albums. Even Don't Fear the Reaper, they all sound pretty good. But yeah, I would definitely seek this out too. I think they put out a limited edition version of this on vinyl for Record Store Day, either last year or the year before. As you can see, I got about half vinyl, half CDs of their catalog. I don't think if you get the first 3 on vinyl, they're going to sound any better because the production is not great, like I said. Also, they did this soundtrack called for a movie called Bad Channels, which I've never seen. This came out in '92. There's like 2 songs on here from them, Demon's Kiss and The Horsemen Arrive, and a couple other songs from some unknown bands. And then the rest of the album is just like ambient, like movie background music. But if you could pick this up cheap, the song Demon's Kiss is actually pretty good. So that's another one. And then, like in the 90s, the Sony Music or CBS, whatever the record company, started putting out these budget 10-song greatest hits albums, sort of. There's a bunch of these out there if you can pick them up cheap. This compilation, Workshop with the Telescopes, is probably the best one to find. It's a double CD. And if you don't have any of their stuff, I would definitely recommend getting this first. There's not really anything unreleased as far as I know on here, but it pretty much covers all of their albums, at least the ones on CBS. So I would definitely start with that if you don't have anything. If you like these videos, please subscribe and tell me your top 5 or 10 Blue Oyster Cult records. Other than that, thanks a lot.